Sometimes I will,
Do we have Dr.
but
John? Do we
no.
have, I'm
The
sorry, hold on one
Trump
second. Do we have Reverend
Organization is now
Johnson
the
up?
subject of a
Paul?
criminal
Paul, can you bring the
investigation
sound,
by the New
please?
York Attorney General's office.
In a statement, the AG's office says we are now actively investigating the Trump Organization in a criminal capacity,
Paul?
along with the Manhattan.
Yes.
Okay, can we
The
bring
office
this down
did
just
not
a
give an
little bit?
explanation for what prompted the change. The
Okay, do we
DA's
have Reverend Johnson
investigation.
on?
We do.
Okay, very good. Okay, you all can say hello to Reverend Johnson, and then we're going to get going with getting on the air. Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Good morning. Let me find out from Chappelle how everything
Okay, very
sounds.
good. Thanks so much.
Because she's up today.
Good morning, Reverend Johnson. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I am fine. I'm always fine. It's another day, right?
Yeah.
It's another
Above the
day.
ground. Checking.
Yeah, greet each day.
You're live. Sound is good.
Okay.
You guys
Yeah.
are live. Okay. Have a great show.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Vicky.
Clearly balanced.
I'm trying to do
Yes.
multiple things at one time.
Former President Trump released a statement last night urging Republicans to vote against approving what he called a Democrat trap. Beginning today, vaccinated New Yorkers can toss the masks. Many businesses can go back to full occupancy if everybody's vaccinated. There's growing international pressure for a ceasefire in the fighting between Israel and Hamas. But this morning, Israel says it's widened its strikes
Paul?
on militant targets.
Yes.
Do you hear something in the background with Reverend Johnson?
Authorities in China's tech center Shenzhen have the vaccine.
No.
It doesn't sound clean.
It sounds like a phone call.
Yeah, no. All the phone calls don't sound like that. I just want to make sure because it doesn't. All the phone calls don't sound like that. They don't. So let's just make sure that. That's why I said, make sure everyone's in a clean place. All the phone calls don't sound like that. Vicky, where are you in a? Does it sound? You hear the little static?
I'm in.
Not static.
I'm
self-described car guy.
Where are you?
Spin in the new truck.
I'm in the same place.
Okay.
It
just doesn't sound as clean. But okay.
Do you want him to hang up and call me back?
No. It just sounds better right now. But I'm hearing something else in addition to. Some calls sound cleaner than others.
He and his wife earned about
And this one, you're on a mobile, right?
Down from $980.
Yes.
Okay, because it's just like mobiles don't sound as clean as landlines typically. But sometimes that's not the case.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. All depends upon where you are.
WCPT820.com.
Yeah. So I'm always looking, and I'm always trying to find the cleanest sound that I can. Yes. Obviously, but I'm hearing a little something in the background. You don't hear that, Paul?
Nothing, weirder than usual.
No, I don't hear that. I don't hear that with every phone call, and that's the thing. Some phone calls, as you know, sound cleaner than others. This one just doesn't sound as clean.
394
So.
Jewel Road. Down Stevenson, traffic is building.
Do you want to try my landline?
Your landline would be better. Can you get that, Paul? Send that to me, Vicky.
It's type Cermak to Roosevelt.
And so that I can send it to Paul.
Okay.
Landline is typically better.
Northbound tries.
Okay.
Republicans have been trying to cancel the minimum wage ever since it was enacted in the 1930s. They've successfully canceled any increases in it for over a decade. Republicans have gone out of their way to try and cancel it.
Right now. Just stay right there, Vicky.
Okay.
They took that all the way to the Supreme Court twice. Why isn't that being referred to as cancel culture?
Paul, I'm sending it to you right now so that you can get her up,
Okay.
Okay, I just sent it to you. Are you near your home phone now, Vicky?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you stay on your mobile until he calls you, okay?
Okay.
Because I don't want to lose one for the other. In the meantime, let me say hello to Francis and Samantha. Okay, very good. Let's hear how these sound.
Hello. Okay.
Okay, now let me hear you on your landline. Hey, Brian. Hey, Shirley.
Good morning.
Well, that's a little better. I hear a buzz, but it's a little better.
I hear the buzz myself.
Well, you know what? Let's go back to mobile. Paul,
Okay.
we're good. Paul, call her on her mobile, please. Hey, Maddie. How you doing, R.A.? Francis, Barbara Jean, Brian, Sandra, or is it Sandra? Samantha. Hey, we got a lot to talk about today. The Andrew Brown case, of course. We're going to be talking about that. But then there is the governor of South Carolina,
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. A joy to be with you on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We've got a lot to talk about today, and so I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you what your thoughts are about what's happening in the Middle East. We're not going to be talking about that today solely, but we'll be getting back to that tomorrow and the next day because it's just every day. It's a heartbreaking story. It's a heartbreaking story. And it's a heartbreaking circumstance. And America is at the center of it. And there's a lot that we can do to make some changes. But will we do that? So call me. I want to hear from you about that. I want to hear what your thoughts are about the Andrew Brown case, which we will be talking about, the gentleman who was killed by the police in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. The district attorney, so the prosecutor rather, said, it was justified. It was a justifiable case. And he didn't call Andrew Brown's family before he made this announcement. So can you imagine how they felt about that? And Andrew Brown was unarmed and he was driving away. So how was the car a deadly weapon if he was driving away from the police officers? Got to talk about that today. And then the South Carolina governor did something really interesting. He signed into law he's going to give death row inmates the opportunity to decide how they want to die. Do you want to die by electrocution, electric chair, or by the firing squad? What do you think about that? What do you think about that? 773-763-WCPT. 773-773-763. Who WCBT? I want to hear what your thoughts are about that. I mean, because I just think it's a sign of the times, right? It's a sign of the times. How do you want to die, you guys? Do you want to be electrocuted or do you want to be shot by the firing squad? And then, of course, COVID-19 Q&A with Dr. Deborah Furholden. And, of course, Reverend Vicki Johnson is going to give us good news for the day. So let us get to some of these headlines so that we can get right to it, everybody, and get on with the day in Chicago. Beautiful spring day, 77 degrees, showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 77 degrees, isolated thunderstorms. That's good for the grass and all the food we grow in this part of the country. The NASDAQ closed down 267 points. The Dow closed down 367 points. The S&P 500 closed down 35 points. And guess what? The Twins and the White Sox have been meeting. And guess what? The Twins were victorious yesterday, 5-4. And they'll be playing a game. The White Sox again today. And of course, the Cubs 6-3 over the Nationals, and they will be playing them once again tonight. Well, the House, let me first say, blessings to our Asian American and Pacific Islander brothers and sisters. This is their Heritage Month, everybody. That's right. And sadly enough, 42% of us in the United States cannot name a single prominent Asian American. That is a study that came out. Can you believe that? And so now there is legislation now that passed by Congress yesterday to counter the rise in anti-Asian hate, everybody. They passed a bill to address the increasing hate crimes and violence against Asian Americans during the coronavirus pandemic, clearing the legislation for President Biden to send. It wasn't even close, everybody. 364 to 62. All 62 votes against the bill were from Republicans. Wow, everybody. So, Rashida Tlaib, one of the squad, can't be mad with her. She confronted President Biden over his unconditional support for Israel amid the Gaza atrocities. Now, mind you, that is a headline from Common Dreams. Mind you, she still has family in Gaza. Her grandmother's still over there. Remember, she wanted to get over there to see her about a year ago. And so, increasingly, we're seeing that President Biden is in conflict with more and more Democrats over his stance on Israel. We're going to see how this all plays out. Indeed, now, a top U.S. military officer, Army General Mark Milley, warned on Monday of the risk of a broader destabilization of beyond Gaza without a de-escalation in the fighting. This could get even uglier, everybody. More than 1,300 people have been injured, more than 200 Palestinians who have been killed. So what do you think about that, everybody? Congresspersons Omar and Tlaib have leading the call to stop what they say is an appalling $735 million weapons sale from the United States to Israel. Now, mind you, this was worked out before this current escalation of this conflict. What do you think about that, everybody? And many people are surprised that Congressman Gregory Meeks out of New York, a member of the Black Caucus, they're saying it's a cave to the Biden administration won't request a delay of this $735 million U.S. arms sale. Wow. In the meantime, Secretary of State Tony Blinken yesterday said that Israel privately gave the United States a justification for flattening a 13-story building in Gaza that housed the offices of the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. Wow. It seems like we know a lot more than we know, than we're saying. And there are riots at Jerusalem's holy sites as troops are firing tear gas at Palestinians. Wow. This is such a painful situation. I want to know what you're thinking about it, though. Call me, text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. President Trump's troubles keep mounting. It turns out that the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, is joining the Manhattan District Attorney's office in a criminal investigation. It was a civil investigation, but now it will be criminal. Where will that go? And now we're hearing that the House will be voting on an investigation into the January 6th riots. Where's that going to go? In the meantime, President Trump, this is against this backdrop, he plans to resume his trademark rallies in June. I think it might be a very hot summer. According to this MSN.com report, President Trump expects to resume rallies with 2 events next month and one around the July 4th holiday. Wow, they're still determining the venues for these rallies. But pay attention, everybody. This political season is getting hot because we're moving into the 2020 election season. And President Trump, former President Trump, will be at the center of that. And hats off to this Congresswoman from California, Representative Katie Porter. She has a white board of justice, everybody, and she's been grilling pharma CEOs on the price hikes, everybody. And she said the big pharma fairy tale is one of the groundbreaking R&D research and development that justifies astronomical prices. But the pharma reality is that you spend most of your company's money making money for yourself and your shareholders, everybody. And she just called them a bunch of liars. Oh, Katie Porter, she doesn't stop, everybody. Well, let's get to Reverend Vicki Johnson. We need some good news today. Reverend Johnson, how are you? Pastor of the St. Thomas Church here in Chicago.
I am well, and yes, we do need some good news today.
Yes, we do.
Well, years ago, when Operation Push had its headquarters at the Capitol Theater on 79th and Halsted in Chicago, Reverend Jackson spent several weeks speaking from the same text found in the 5th chapter of John about the man with an infirmity. You see, there were all manner of sick people that lay at the pool of Bethesda, waiting for the angel to trouble the water, because the first one to step into the water in that season would be healed. It was an unjust healthcare system, but the people went along with it because they had no other alternatives. But then along came Jesus, who saw the inequities in the system and wanted to do something to rectify it. So Jesus goes to the pool outside of the open enrollment season and asks the infirm man who had been laying by the pool, listen at this, for 38 years. Jesus asked him, "Will thou be made whole?" After being there in this condition for 38 years, 38 years, one would think his immediate response would be an emphatic yes. But instead, Reverend Jackson said, and this is what stood out to me about these speeches that he gave week after week, is that this infirmed man, instead of saying yes, he gave a 26-word answer that only required one word. How many times have you been asked a simple question and you gave a 26-word reply, negating the good that is knocking at your door? Jesus asked the man, did he want to be healed? He is asking us that same question today, and he wants us to be the angel that asks others that same question. Do you want to be healed? Healed of sickness, healed of financial distress, healed of loneliness, lack, and limitations, or whatever your situation may be. When the question comes to you, simply say yes and expect Jesus through others to do for you what he did for the man at Bethesda, giving you the opportunity for another testimony of victory. And to me, that's good news.
That is good news. One word.
Just one word.
One word. Big
Yes.
or big excuse. Because thank you so much. But before we go to Dr. Deborah Holden, because he was there 38 years. What does that mean to you that he stayed there 38 years?
It shows how we can become comfortable in our very uncomfortable situation. It shows how we can become complacent. And it's almost through no fault of our own. It's because of the systems that are around us that set us up to just be in it for 38 years and not ruffle any feathers. So, we've got to do something. Those of us who feel like we are not in that situation, even though most all of us are, we must be willing to do something to change things like Jesus did.
Thank you so much for that. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. Pastor Vicki Johnson, how can we hear you on the weekend? How can we hear you worship?
Well, if you would go to the St. Thomas Lutheran Church Chicago Facebook page, you can hear us, you can see us, and I know that you will be blessed by being a part of our worship experience.
Are you worshiping in person or is it virtual?
We had a live worship this past Sunday. It was a trial, and it was in our courtyard because we're not ready to go back in the building to see how things would work out. And so we'll be assessing that so that we can have worship in the courtyard during the summer months as we prepare to go back into the building.
Pastor Vicki Johnson, I want you to stay right here. That you're leading us into the COVID-19 Q&A that we have every day with Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. Dr. Deborah Verholden, you hear how Pastor Johnson is handling this reopening. She's being very, very, very deliberate, and she's taking it slow. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a smart move. It gives you a chance to adjust and to monitor and to see. Because the problem with most people with their opening plans is they don't have a plan when to turn back. You know, we often will make the plan and chart the course for where we're going and how we plan to get there. But we very rarely think about what are the conditions under which I would turn around and go back home. What are the circumstances that would have me dial it back? And so I think when people open very intentionally and in phases, the point of the phase is to make sure that things are working. You know, if things are working, then you can keep going. If they don't, then you pause, and then you got to reassess and reevaluate. So I think that's exactly the way to do it. Okay. Slowly and in phases. Don't just open the doors and just jump everything back to normal, because there also likely are things, and there's a lot of guidance on how to do this, but there are likely things that you will learn in real time. And you'd rather learn those in real time in these phases with different numbers of people coming, different exposure, risk levels, and all of that. So, yeah, because we're going to have to reopen. You know, we're going to have to reopen. But I think how people do it will be really important. So I like this approach. Okay, all right. We need to have this approach. It gets trickier, I think, when you have to go back to school and we're going back into the offices and things like that. But thank you for that. What's on your mind today with COVID-19? We're watching a couple of high-profile resignations from the CDC because of the mask confusion, but we're also watching deaths drop and some cases drop, and yet we're watching in the global south COVID-19 just rage almost out of control in Brazil. That really is the worst case scenario in the world in Brazil, everybody. They're even worse than they're having a harder time of it than they are having in India. What do you want to talk about today? Well, we've got a big drop in cases in my state and in my county. I do something every week. It's called the Health Equity Policy Brief. And we produce, we lead with the data. Dr. Deb always got to deal with the what so. Like you say, know my truth, know your truth. If we're talking about the truth, there's just the truth. And so to the best extent of my ability, I try to give people the truth and the what so with the numbers. But we're really tackling and taking on this big issue this week around childhood vaccines. I think it's going to be something that we're really going to have to figure out. As I really begin to think about it and unpack it, I thought, so you've got the CDC basically telling people live your best life if you're vaccinated, which I don't agree with that. I just don't. I think if you are in a fully vaccinated group, or you are the one in the group that's not vaccinated because you can, or you have some, other condition, or you're still grappling, but your group knows that, that's a whole different story. That's very different than telling somebody you can now be indoors, you can go to the grocery store, you can go to the mall, you can, do whatever you want unmasked if you're vaccinated. I don't agree with that. It just has so many problems with it. Because then the thing that I also thought about is, well, what does that mean for children? Because watch this. Children under 12 are not eligible for vaccines. So that means all children under 12, according to this, should still be masked, correct? But that's not going to happen. And what does that say, or what does that do, or what signal does that send psychologically to children? And this issue has come up now because you got kids and parents that are doing summer school and that are doing summer camps. And, these recommendations gave a lot of people the green light to keep moving forward with those plans. And so the leaders are saying, well, Dr. Deb, what about the kids? This says for the vaccinated, but none of the children in our camp are of the age where they can be vaccinated. They're all, under age 12. I said, that's a great point. As per if you wanted to follow the guidelines, then those kids would still have to be masked up, which I think would be problematic for kids to see all of their adults unmasked and them to be required to wear masks. So this issue around these incentives that we have for people to get vaccinated, in my county, they're about to pay everybody $50 to get vaccinated. That's what's coming. I actually had dinner with our health officer last night and a couple of her staff, and we talked about it, and she knows that's not my preferred method. I said, if anything, instead of the $50, why not offer people, transportation? Why not pick them up and drop them off? There are things that, would truly make this no problem for people. And why not take the vaccine to people? Why not vaccinate them on their porch? And she said, well, we're willing to do that. There's some things they got to work out to be able to do that. But she said the $50 incentive, when we asked people who were what they called hesitant, they said that would tip the scales for them.
Money?
And I said, well, money.
Does that make you feel, how does that make you feel?
Slimy.
Oh, okay.
Slimy. Like I just got, hoodwinked by a used car salesman.
That doesn't feel good to me. Again, I keep saying, I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record. If people would speak to folks' misgivings, people are not hesitant. They are mistrusting. And I think that if you backdoor people, and that's what I think is happening, that's going to brew more distrust and anger. I really do in time. I don't see that working out well, Dr. Dan.
I don't either. But that's where we're headed. We saw what happened in Ohio, and now we see what's starting to happen in other places. A lot of other places are not only paying people, but they're attaching community vaccination rates to reopening. So our governor just did a big press conference, 5% more, and then we'll, open up this or go back to that. They're just dangling the carrot out in front that they think will get people to get the shot in the arm. And I agree with you. I think that's going to have the unintended consequence
1 minute
of pushing some people who legitimately have said, I just need more time or I need more information, right? It'll probably push them further down the no chain. For some people who are on the fence and just haven't bothered to get off the fence, it might tip the scales for them. But for the people that really have misgivings about it, I think it's going to have the unintended negative consequence for them.
Hey, everybody, we're going to talk about this. We're going to be talking about Dr. Deb, the governor of South Carolina, has just signed into law they're going to give death penalty to prisoners of choice. They can either die by firing squad
15
or they can die by electrocution. Is that
10
crazy? Call me 773-763-WCPT.
5
What you're thinking, everybody, on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Can you believe that, Deborah? I think people have just gone crazy.
That seems so illegal. I don't even think death by electrocution is right. I don't like all of that stuff is inhumane now. I just watched this special the other day, and they were talking about this executioner in Nazi Germany and how when they, were ultimately, caught and they were holding people to account for Nazi war criminals, he became the executioner of the people who were formerly telling him who to execute. He now was the executioner for those people. Anyway, they had a guillotine, and they said what made him great was he was fast. People didn't suffer. People weren't there. begging for their life and all that. He was good. He was fast. It never didn't work. You know, when you hear about these electrocutions and all this, you know, some of the times these things didn't work, or people, they had to do it much longer. People in the gallery described the smell of human flesh burning and all this other stuff. I mean, I don't agree with the death penalty at all, because our system is imperfect. But there are more humane ways to end somebody's life than a firing squad.
Oh, you know, he's giving them a choice. Honey, he's giving them a choice.
Or the electric chair. It's like when I was a kid, my mother said, you want to get a beating or you want to get punished?
Okay.
I said, oh, I'll take the punishment. I used to always take the punishment. I'm like, don't hit me. I'll take the punishment. My brother would take the beating every time because, you know, he said that's over and then I'd go outside and play. I would always take but that's a terrible choice to have to choose from. The firing squad or the electric chair.
Yeah, which do you want? Hello, everybody. Is this crazy? Do we have Dwight McKee and Sergeant Kennedy with us? I know how much you love Dr. D, Dwight McKee.
I know I haven't heard Dwight's voice, that nice radio voice, in a long time.
Hey, Dr. D.
Oh, my God.
Hi, Dwight.
How you doing, Dr. D?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
I'm pretty fair.
This is going to be an interesting conversation today. I might have to.
You want to sit?
I'll probably go on the Facebook. I just want to hear it. I don't want to chime in. I just want to hear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I saw it and I said, this is so crazy. And I think that in light of the the state, they were so the prosecutor was so adamant in his defense of the justifiable killing of Andrew Brown yesterday. I said, I've got to tie this, I think, to this, because this is somewhere in the spirit of the times, you know, the zeitgeist. I said, because you know, this guy, I think it's Governor McMaster, he absolutely feels justified, and it passed. I mean, it was now, he signed the bill. Oh my gosh. Do we have Sergeant Kennedy on?
You do, yes.
Okay. How you doing? Good morning.
How are you?
I am doing good. Just a little hoarse.
Oh, you sound stellar.
Coming back in 10 seconds.
Thank you so much. You sound stellar. So we're going to come right back up with this. And I'm going to find out from everybody what they're thinking about this today.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our head held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820. The nation's largest progressive talk radio station in Chicago, AM 950 radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and people from all over the country and all over the world. Meet us over on Facebook, everybody, on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and on WCPT's page, and on my YouTube page. Everybody, please like and subscribe. You all have been joining. I'm so happy. On the Santita Jackson Show page, my channel. I want to hear from you. I want to know what you're thinking, everybody. At the top of the hour, of course, we'll be talking about Andrew Brown and the justifiable killing. Can you justify the killing of someone who is driving away from the police? If the car is driving away, if he's driving the car away, how is it a deadly weapon against the police? But we'll get there at the top of the hour. Right now, I want to hear what you think about the law. Let's see. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster signed a bill into law that requires death row inmates to choose between the electric chair and a firing squad. The law now requires in South Carolina that death penalty inmates choose between the electric chair and the firing squad. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. What do you think about this? Now, Charles Booker, who almost became the Democratic nominee out of Kentucky, but remember they only had one polling place open for more than 600,000 voters. Yeah, that Charles Booker. He said this is brutal, inhumane, and does nothing to deter crime. The death penalty needs to be abolished. It won final approval in the GOP controlled South Carolina legislature last week, and it adds a firing squad as a method of execution, and it makes the electric chair the default. There are 37 people on death row in South Carolina, 19 of whom are black. So I want to know what you're thinking, everybody. Call me, text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I want to know what you're thinking about that. Before I get to Dr. D, Dwight McKee, and Sergeant Sean Kennedy, retired from the Chicago Police Department, officer, director of information at the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. Let me go to you, Maria. What's on your mind? You called in real fast today.
Good morning, Santita. I don't believe in the death penalty, but that's my own personal view, because if we valued life from the inception to death, then we should be consistent. To hear that this governor has signed a bill giving those that are sentenced to death the option between being electrocuted or being, killed by a shooting squad, a firing squad, that leaves me speechless. Okay, irregardless of whether they were found guilty and whether they deserved the sentence of death, that to me is so inhumane and so savage. Just the act, the fact that this bill was signed into law, that in and of itself is a crime in a sense, from my perspective, because it shows a lack of humanity. It shows a lack of I'm speechless. That's all I can say. Personally, who the hell is going to choose between being electrocuted or being killed by a firing squad? No one's going to want either choice.
Maria, but that's the law now. So hold on.
Oh, I don't care.
I hear you. I'm not mad at you. It's just crazy. But you know what? We've got Dr. D, Dwight McKee, noted social scientist, and we've got retired Sergeant Sean Kennedy. He was with the Chicago Police Force. Now he's the Director of Information for the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. Sergeant Kennedy, what do you make of this? It's the law in South Carolina.
First let me say that I do not believe in the death penalty, because I think about the number of black people who have been proven years later that they were not the right people on death row. I think about Chicago, the number of black men who were put on death row by disgraced former commander John Burge through all type of tortures. So to me, it's, when I think about the death penalty, regardless of what the crime was, to me, it's almost like a state-sanctioned lynching of people, of black people in particular. So just to know that this bill has passed is, for me, is very problematic. It's almost like different states are trying to turn back the hands of time back to an era where you can basically put black people back in this oppressive type of state where you can do certain things about, because if you wind up using the death penalty on one person and that one person was innocent, that's enough to abolish it. And we already know that there have been multiple people of color in particular, who were killed when later it was found out that they were innocent. So I feel the death penalty should be abolished, period, in every single state. But I'm just very surprised to hear that in this particular state, it was passed into law as far as for them to choose their method of poison, which I feel is very inhumane.
Dwight McKee, what does this say? What do you think about this? And what does this say about our society? Call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. What do you think about the law in South Carolina that requires death penalty inmates to choose between the firing squad and the electric chair? Dwight McKee?
Well, the electric chair has been barbaric since it was introduced by Thomas Edison as a marketing tool when he was trying to compete against Tesla and Westinghouse for whether the world was going to use AC or DC currents. That's really the birth of the electric chair. It's always been a tool of Thomas Edison to demonstrate the fact that he had the best electric currents in the world. It's always been barbaric. And when you talk about choosing between that and the electric chair, and the firing squad, neither of them are a solution to the issues. Both of them are on the brink of insanity. We may as well go back to the medieval days when we was putting people on the stake or burning people at the stake. I think that the professor is right, that the policeman is right, that because there's no margin for error when you use the death penalty, it is an insane way to resolve an issue, because all you have to have be wrong is with one, and you killed an innocent man. And a society which fights for the sanctity of life and profess that life is the greatest good, and who's anti-abortion, and it is the essence of hypocrisy, even to be talking about the death penalty in the 21st century.
But Dwight, what is the point of having the death row inmate choose which way they're going to die? I mean, and you can either be fried to death or shot to death. I mean, and I'm sorry to put it so bluntly, everybody, but that's what it is. I mean, my father witnessed an execution down in Texas, and it's something that he has not gotten over. In fact, Reverend Charlton was there, but this gentleman wanted my father to be there till the very end, and he was talking to my father as he was being electrocuted. And he kept saying to him, "Jesse, don't stop. Reverend, don't stop. Jesse, don't stop." I mean, as he was being fried to death, Dwight. It was horrible. I mean, it was just horrible. I couldn't really. I mean, it was Reverend Sharpton who really gave me the story, because my father couldn't even talk about it. That's awful.
It says more about the executioner than it does about the person that's electrocuted or shot. Is that what you have? It's just suggesting you about the base contempt for life that some of these people have. Is that it has more to do with how they feel about the people who they're willing to have shot and killed and murdered. They really themselves have a real disdain for the value of life.
What does it say to you? I mean, as someone you know about John Burge, can you just very briefly, Sergeant Kennedy, tell us about John Burge and what does it say to you that the governor would sign this into law, and that that they would sign this into law, and that they would have someone choose: do you want to be electrocuted, or do you want to face a firing squad? I mean, this is in 2021.
Well, former Commander John Burge. So there was, and it happened for multiple years. He actually had a team of detectives who would take part of this. And so a lot of African-American men they were tortured by putting different prods on their genitals, covering their face up with plastic so they couldn't breathe. A number of other type of torture techniques that he learned from the military. It was discovered that, this is what his crew did. They never were able to convict him until the feds got involved, and they actually convicted him for lying to the feds. But this was the type of technique that they were using on Black people to clear up murder rates. So you had a lot of Black people who were unfairly convicted of crimes that they didn't commit. And then later they were exonerated and they were all removed from death row. So, this was the mentality of a commander of police with the Chicago Police Department. And like I said, there were people below him who knew about it. As a matter of fact, a lot of this information is actually archived under the Reporter newspaper. They did a series, I think like maybe 20 separate articles that detail the different things that were occurring. But just to know that the governor of South Carolina signed a bill like this, like I said, to me, this is very sadistic. It's very sadistic to even know that when someone is being executed, whether it's by a firing squad, electrocution, gas chamber, whatever, you have a lot of people who flock around who actually want to witness someone's life being drained out of their body. To me, that's just very sadistic. It's something about that I have a problem with. But just to know that the government on the state level has agreed to or passed into law that, someone who's on death row is mandated to choose their poison, how you want to die. To me, it makes no sense. If you want to pass a bill on police accountability. Pass a bill that will actually serve the people and not your own personal interest.
Dwight McKee?
Yes,
please.
This is also the same crowd, Santita, that burned down Tulsa. This is the same crowd that threw Emmett Till in the Tallahassee Bridge. This is the same crowd that stormed the Capitol with ropes looking for Pelosi. There is a certain barbaric mentality that this country operates in that we're not honest about. This is the same crowd that walked the Indians from Mississippi to South Dakota and took their land. There was a certain barbarity to America that we're not real honest about.
773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. I think that as we talk about racial reckoning, I think we have to have a fundamental moral reckoning in this country. Racism is a part of it, there's no question. But just classism overall, whether we racialize classism or not, just look at how we treat each other, everybody. Can you imagine a law was passed in these United States and signed? A law was passed, and the governor of South Carolina, Governor McMaster, signed it, and it requires a death row inmate to choose how they want to die. You only have two choices, so you can either get shot to death or you can get electrocuted. What does that say to you, everybody? What does that say to you about where we are? When you can justify killing someone who was driving away and then you call his car a deadly weapon against whom? When you make this announcement and you don't call his family to let them know in advance what you're going to say when you speak with them, can you really be surprised that something like this, Dwight, will be signed into law? When we do all of this, when you have your knee on someone's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, and you try to justify it, what? What? 2 or 3 other people kneeling on his body while someone else is doing lookout. Dwight.
Which means the state is already predisposed to execution. One of the reasons I'm convinced that they don't want us to see the tapes of down in Carolina is because that SWAT group really looked like a posse in the back of their truck. that they were on their way to shoot somebody. And they don't want to see that conversation that they were having because they was treating it like they were going to a picnic. Again, you're talking about a society that used to, on Sundays, have a picnic, a pickaninny, in order that they would hang as a point of recreation, which was the national pastime before baseball. I mean, we come from a society of barbarians, I always talk about, and that bring a mentality of the real enjoyment, it seems like, of killing other people.
Well, hold on.
And making it heroic some kind of way.
So do you see a through line between Emmett Till and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and on and on and on through this law? I mean, is there a through line?
The law only reflects the law reflects a mentality. And that mentality is that death, the ultimate power of the state, and when the state speaks, there should be no recourse. That if they have to be the state, because I can guarantee you, if those people that stormed the Capitol, if they were charged with treason, which is punishable by death, and they put firing squads on those people, that law would change overnight. The law now will become barbaric. So it's not just about the execution, it's who gets killed. This has as much to do with who they are executing is the method of execution. But if these roles were reversed, then they would declare to be barbarity, and whereas these people who, these police who shoot people for no reason or out of as a hate crime, or these guys who stormed the Capitol who were, in a real sense, traitors, which is punishable by death, if they were on death row, you would see these laws change.
Sergeant Kennedy, who would be on the firing squad? How does that work?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't have any information as far as who that consists of. Would it be someone from the military, the police? I have no idea because I've never, dealt with anyone from the firing squad aspect. So I really have no comment on that. But like I said, this sounds so crazy. Ridiculous.
Yes.
I think about, it's almost like state by state by state, they're trying to turn their hands back in time. Like, and it's so crazy because I'm not keeping up with what's happening at different states. There's one state that's trying to pass a bill where it would be lawful if someone was, protesting and blocking the roadway. It would be lawful for someone to hit them with their car. And it's like, this is crazy. So as I listen to the news, it's like different states are trying to pass these ridiculous bills that is not for the benefit of the residents in the community, which are Black or the Black protesters. It's for their personal gains. It makes no sense whatsoever. And really, the voters, they need to start really pulling their powers together, and they need to vote these people who are in their legislation, vote them out of office if they're trying to pass these type of bills, because it's not on their in their best interest. I think about what South Carolina, you have, I believe it was 35 or 37 people currently on death row. The majority of those people on death row are Black residents. Mm-hmm. So like I said, it's almost like the state is trying to sanction, lynching against Black and brown people. They're just trying to do it in a different way. Not each state, but several states are trying to pass these ridiculous laws that are mostly having an adverse impact on the Black and brown community. And these citizens need to really, like I said, pull their powers together and vote these individuals out of office who's trying to pass these ridiculous bills.
I mean, Joe, what's on your mind? Joe from Chicago?
Hi, it's Jill from Chicago. Good morning.
Joe, how are you?
I'm doing great. I love your show. I love WCTT.
Thank you.
I've been in transportation for 40 years. Part of that has been driving in Chicago area, and I think we'd all agree that we see crazy things every day. So now it's been established that a vehicle is a weapon, and an officer has the right to take legal action to protect his life. If my life is as valuable as a police officer or anybody else, the guy that's flying 90 miles an hour down 355, does that serve warrant for the officer to shoot him in the head?
In the back of the head, Joe.
Absolutely.
What does that say to you? Yes, no, please.
Well, it says that these laws are just, Band-Aids, so quick. I don't know, Santita. I don't know. I'm so crazy with what's going on. I'm all about responsibility. Some of my opinions on things, most people would think I'm probably a Republican, and that's so far from the case.
But that's okay.
But, personal responsibility, take care of yourself and your family.
But that's not Republican. That's human and humane, right? That we shouldn't make that a partisan issue.
Well, exactly. But your topic this morning on the death penalty and choose how you're going to end your life just is insanity to me. From the same people that are outside abortion homes or clinics, it's crazy.
Wait a minute.
We are totally upside down.
Joe, I got a minute before we go. When you first heard that this was signed into law by the governor of South Carolina, that you can pick your poison. You literally, if you're on death row, it is required that you choose between the firing squad and the electric chair. What did you think when you first heard that?
God help us all, because one life lost is too many in the case of a mistake, and I believe your guest mentioned that. My son or daughter or anybody, and anybody. It just
Anybody. And with all of these newfangled things that people could do with technology,
1 minute.
Anybody can be put anywhere at any time. Your voice can be used, your image can be manipulated, anything can happen. Anything. This is awful.
Right. Yes, it is. Well, thank you for your time. Again, I just love your show, and
and I love you, Joe. You be safe out there. Or you driving around. And if someone goes nuts on you, just step back, Joe. Just let them drive on.
30.
Let them drive on. Everybody, let's talk about Andrew Brown. Can we justify his killing? He was shot in the back of the head as he was driving away from the police. But they're saying that his car was a weapon. How? And why were his family called
15.
before the announcement was made that there were
10.
no charges brought against these police officers? Call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT. This is the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a few minutes. Oh, Sergeant Kennedy and Dwight McKee, it's just too much. I just find these little stories, and I just have to bring them, because you know what? I think they make us think. And you could hear from Miss Joe. She said, I don't even know. People have no words for this. Because it really does sound awful, and it is. How about that? Dwight, are you speechless?
No, I was waiting for Brother Kennedy to respond.
Yeah, I've already made my point. These type of laws are ridiculous, and we need to be watchful and mindful of the states that's trying to pass laws that are really not benefiting the community, in particular the Black residents in the community. We need to be really mindful of these ridiculous laws that's trying to be passed.
Well, we're on Facebook Live right now, everybody. We're not on the air. Joyce Anderson said, "Excuse my vernacular. They have lost their freaking minds." I know what you meant to say, girl. But it's, you know what? I think, Dwight, I don't want to speak for you. You're making the point that this is very much part of the culture, right?
Part of the culture, and the electric chair is as barbaric as a firing squad. It's just the whole notion of frying somebody to death.
Oh.
It lets you guard and know absolutely that they've done what they said they've done. And even then, Christ has allotted a dimension of forgiveness and contrition for those who profess to be Christians. I mean, if that had been a mentality, we never would have had Paul in the New Testament. The contradictions are just astounding. Here are people who talk about you can use a car as a weapon against
We have Attorney Fancher.
But you sanction that. But if the police is running down the street shooting at you, you can't use your car to drive away from getting shot at by the police.
No, you just take a bullet in the back of the head and it's nobody's fault. It's your fault.
Yeah, this is a level of contradictions and insanity. But it has to do with everything to do with who's doing the shooting and who's getting shot.
Well, now that is what that's what Sergeant Kennedy just said. I don't know, you guys. This is crazy. I said, wait a minute. You literally can pick your poison. Not do I want an injection? Not do. I mean, letting someone serve out the rest of their life in prison is a death sentence in many respects. But you say I can either die by firing squad. I'm wondering, would that be automated, or would they, virtual, or would they have people just standing before you and shooting you to death? Who does that?
It is not obtuse for this culture. I mean, when you think about what's happening in Palestine and dropping bombs on these children, when you think about the history again of the country, it's not really, when you think about it, it's not really that strange for a country who values money and power more than.
And we have Reverend Yuri.
Life.
Thank you. We have Mark Fancher and Reverend Yuri, Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri, Esquire, and Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers, great civil libertarian. We've been talking about this, about the bill that was signed into law by the governor of South Carolina, everybody, where the death row inmates are required to choose between the firing squad and the electric chair. But we're going to move on from that lighthearted topic to Andrew Brown. How about that? Easy. Oh, it just gets to be a little bit much. Were you about to say something, Mark?
No, I was just going to say, you know how to have a good time.
You are terrible. I just can't believe he said that to me. Shame on him. You know what? I find this stuff, and I just, I think Dwight knows, because I've known Dwight since I was 2. These are the kind of conversations that we would have around my dining room table, and that we have, even my family and I have now. Dwight, would you not say that's true?
Oh, absolutely.
And we have Attorney Hoffler.
See,
absolutely. As a child, we used to have these conversations. I was a child.
When you were a child and I was a toddler, you have these, literally, we have these conversations, and my mother would be the driver of them, believe it or not, because she's a brilliant woman. And this is, and at every holiday, we have like a mock trial, or we have a debate over some big issue. And this is where we are. You know what? I'm hearing something in the background. Is anyone outside? No? No one's outside? Okay, CK Hoffler.
No, yeah, I'm on mute.
Okay, no, just make sure get off mute because if I come to you, I want you to be able to jump in. Reverend Yuri, how are you? I'm doing a mic check.
I'm well. How are you?
Great. CK Hoffler. CK Hoffler. Is she on mute? Paul, or is she there? Mark Fancher.
Good morning.
Okay, yeah, the call should sound like this. Dwight McKee.
I'm here. Hey, Mark.
Sergeant Kennedy.
Hey, how you doing, Dwight?
I am here.
Okay, where's CK Hoffler, Paul? Attorney Hoffler.
She should be here.
Okay, she's not answering. We don't have anyone muted accidentally, do we? CK? Maybe she stepped away. Let's see. Okay. Let me see. Paul, can you check? I mean,
We got to start.
Yeah, I don't want
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is the voice of progressive Minnesota, and WCPT, largest progressive talk radio station in the nation, right here in Chicago. I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. We're still taking comments on South Carolina. South Carolina has decreed that death row inmates must choose between the electric chair and the firing squad, and which leads us into, in its own way, to the Andrew Brown case. We're going to be talking about that with this illustrious panel. What do you think about how this case has been handled? What do you think about someone getting shot in the back of the head, and they've called his killing justifiable? That is coming from the prosecutor in North Carolina, in Elizabeth City. So let's talk about that, everybody. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I want you to meet my morning stars, Francis and Barbara Jean and Paula and Sandra and Shirley from Philadelphia and Brian and Maddie and so many of you, Samantha and Raphael and Deborah and L. Stanley Davis, Hallelujah Davis and D. Ray and Barbara Jean out there in Oak Park. Lorraine, that's right. So many of us. Meet Vicky and everybody over there today. And like and share, everybody. Like and share. Create some watch parties, please, on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. And, of course, on the WCPT 820 Facebook page. We're streaming there as well. And the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing, everybody. Please continue to do that. Let's get to some of these headlines so we can get on to the rest of the show. Chicago will have a high of 77 degrees. Showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, also a high of 77 degrees. Isolated thunderstorms. The NASDAQ closed down 267 points yesterday. The Dow closed down 367 points. And the S&P 500 closed down 35 points. Wow, we have been facing off against, well, the Twins and the White Sox. Boy, what a series it's been. Indeed, the Sox, a couple of days ago, 16-4 over the Twins. Well, the Twins came roaring back 5-4 over the White Sox. And now they're going to be playing them again this afternoon. Chicago Cubs 6, Nationals 3. And they will be facing off against the Nationals once again tonight, everybody. All right. We want to wish our Asian brothers and sisters, Asian American brothers and sisters in the Pacific Islanders, the AAPI community. It is the Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, everybody. And there was a bill passed yesterday to address the increase in hate crimes in the midst of this pandemic against Asian Americans. It passed by a vote of 364 to 62 all Republican voters. Wow. And the legislation, it instructs the Department of Justice to designate a point person to expedite the review of hate crimes related to COVID-19. Did you know that 42% of Americans cannot name a single prominent Asian American? Got some work to do, everybody. We've got some work to do. And the average COVID-19 cases, the numbers in the United States are the lowest that they've been in nearly a year, according to the White House. They're down in all 50 states. And just think, we haven't even reached herd immunity. That's good news. About 48% of the population has gotten at least one dose. And fewer than that, just a little more than about 35% have gotten all doses. But can you imagine the numbers are going down, even though we're not near herd immunity? Wow. The Capitol riot is on the agenda on the House side today. They're set to vote today on setting up an independent bipartisan commission to investigate the Capitol insurrection of January 6th. What do you think is going to happen, everybody? What do you think is going to happen? Palestinian protesters gathered by the thousands in cities in the West Bank, calling for mass strikes to convince political leaders to stop the Israeli airstrikes that have pummeled the region. Indeed, Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman from Detroit, who assumed the seat held for decades by John Conyers. We must never, ever forget him. She's Palestinian American. In fact, her grandmother lives in the Palestinian territory. She lives in Gaza. She confronted President Biden over his unconditional support for Israel amid these airstrikes, everybody. And top U.S. military officer Mark Milley warned on Monday, of the risk of broader destabilization beyond Gaza without a de-escalation of the fighting between Israel and Palestinians. I tell you, this is going to be, we've got to work something out, everybody. President Biden, increasingly, according to this Washington Post story, is coming into conflict with fellow Democrats as he resists a shift in his party toward a tougher stand on Israel and a stronger support for the Palestinians. The conversation about the Middle East has shifted, not slightly and now broadly, greatly over the past few years. And it turns out that, according to Secretary of State Blinken, Israel privately gave the U.S. a justification for flattening the 13-story building in Gaza that housed the offices of the Associated Press and Al Jazeera and the press. Wow. What do you think about that, everybody? What do you think about that? Oh, boy. So let's get right to it. Yesterday, were you really surprised to learn that Andrew Brown's killing was going to, well, there's not going to be any charges. The police have been deemed justified in killing him. Now, he was driving away and he was shot in the back of his head. What do you think about that, everybody? And it was stunning because as I was watching it on television, the news organizations carried the whole press conference, and it lasted quite some time because, many people kept asking him, and how can you justify this? And why didn't you call Andrew Brown's family prior to making this announcement? He never even called them. That's right. They did not speak to the Brown family, before making this announcement. Why did they shoot an unarmed man in a car that was moving away from them? How do you justify this? District Attorney Andrew Womble declined to file charges against the North Carolina sheriff's deputies in the fatal shooting of Andrew Brown in Elizabeth City. And this is after the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, the state FBI, if you will, they said, well, we've looked at all the tapes. Now, mind you, his family haven't seen the tapes, not all of them, not from start to finish. Nobody has. There's been no transparency, but they kept talking about that. So what do you think about that? They've been cleared. All the deputies have been cleared. And the tapes that we have seen, they look like they were going to shoot somebody. I mean, in Little Elizabeth City, North Carolina, they look like a SWAT team going to shoot this man. And they did do that. And he had a bullet in the back of his head. What do you make of this case? What do you make of this case, everybody? Do you think that you could call this, they said it was justifiable? Justifiable. So I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Joining Sergeant Sean Kennedy, retired from the Chicago Police Department. He is the information officer for the National Association of Black law enforcement officers. These are the people who've been on the streets with us, protecting us for years. Dwight McKee, Dr. D, noted social scientist, and of course, attorney C.K. Hoffler, president of the National Bar Association, and she hosts her own radio show on WAOK every Tuesday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, the People's Attorney. She's also the chair of Rainbow Push. And we have got Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers, brilliant civil libertarian, and Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, Esquire. How many degrees and jobs does he have? And he does them all brilliantly. Of course, he is the senior pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, Maryland, also senior vice president of Rainbow Push. Let me start with you, attorney C.K. Hoffler. Justifiable homicide. Well, not justifiable homicide. They were justified, according to the district attorney, Andrew Womble. They were justified in shooting him as he drove away. What do you make of that?
I found that to be actually deplorable. I was very, very disappointed by the judge's ruling about a couple of weeks ago when he only allowed the family to see under 20 minutes of footage. I was equally as disappointed and disgusted with the way that they have proceeded in investigating this case. The 2-hour footage is going to be made public, will be available to the family at some point. So why not make it available to them if they knew, because surely they knew that they were going to find that this is justifiable. If they knew this was going to be their finding, give the family the opportunity, the dignity to be able to see the footage so they know what happened to their loved one. Because remember, the family had a private autopsy done that determined that he was shot in the back of the head, something that law enforcement failed to disclose. I think it's deplorable. I think it's sad. I think it lacks transparency, and it reeks of something else. And I seriously question the findings of the district attorney, but I haven't seen all the evidence, and I think it's very, very bad the way that this will be handled from beginning to end.
Sergeant Kennedy, you have been on the streets. You have worked with people as a police officer. You're now retired. He was driving the car away. Was the car then a weapon if he was driving it away from the police officers?
So let me tell you how this should have played out strategically. You should not be using your bodies as police officers, even though you have these long guns trying to stop a vehicle. These officers were in vehicles. All you would have to do is use your actual vehicles to block his vehicle in where he could not go forward or backwards. But they tried to use their bodies, and because they had these intimidating long guns, they assumed that he was going to comply, which he did not do. When I saw the additional portion of the tape that the reporter took in court, as soon as I saw it, I kept thinking about, okay, these are boys with guns. Because sometimes when you have guns, you practice your gun at firing range or whatever, but I'm quite sure it's a different experience when you actually shoot at a target. So just a small piece that I watched as far as how this played out, all I saw Andrew Brown doing is trying to flee from the police. I didn't see him trying to intentionally strike anyone. But if officers are using their bodies, which to me is stupid, to try to block someone in, of course, when he's trying to flee, you're going to now try to interpret that or twist it as he's trying to hit us. He's trying to run us over. No, he's not. He's trying to get away from you. You just happen to be standing in front of the car because you're too stupid to move out the way, And that, to me, that was a justification for shooting at the car. One of the reasons why officers should not shoot at a moving vehicle, because if you make contact with someone and shoot them, that vehicle is still going to travel into some type of object stops that vehicle, which means you risk innocent people being killed unnecessarily based on that car hitting someone else. So that's one of the reasons why you should not be shooting at a moving vehicle. And we have to still remember why the police was there. They wasn't there to arrest someone who murdered someone. They were there to arrest someone on a warrant for drugs. We're talking about drugs. If he got away, so be it. You know who he is. You know how to go about finding them. It's just, everything about this situation to me, was wrong. It started when the family only was able to view 20 seconds of the body cam. That was a clear indication that you're trying not to be transparent. You're trying to cover something, but you're trying to use it as, well, the judge has to release it. Well, the judge didn't have to release that 20 seconds that you showed the family. But even, like I said, the technique of, as far as how it played out to me was just wrong. And I feel that when officers stand in front of a vehicle trying to stop that vehicle, and when someone tries to flee the officers, which is what Andrew Brown did, these officers will then use that as a justification because he's trying to use his vehicle as a weapon outside of just fleeing from the police.
Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, Esquire. What do you make of this?
Well, it's the demonstration of, I think, incompetence, but it's also the inside game of what happens when the close relationships between district attorneys and law enforcement in the same jurisdiction get played out in incidents like these. It's one of the reasons why the federal legislation needs to move forward in Washington, because I think it changes the oversight. It forces outside eyes, if you will, to be able to look at the issues from a more objective point of view. Some of the issues that go all the way back to the judge's ruling. The judge issued a ruling, didn't file the ruling until 9 days later. Those 9 days give the department time to get its story straight. And I think what we saw on yesterday was a DA that had time to come up with his own plausible explanation that was going to lead him to, I think, a determination that he had made long before that, long before the judge's ruling about whether or not we would see the body camera evidence or not. I think that DA had already determined that it was a justifiable shooting and a justifiable use of force. The moving of the car, the other piece that we have to look at is the implications of what happens when there are vacancies on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has increasingly expanded the cover that officers have in the use of force, in the ability to violate our rights against unreasonable search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment, even to the point where there are some cases where the Supreme Court has said a police officer only reasonably has to believe that the law they are enforcing is really a law. They could be wrong about that on the first case, and anything else that comes after it could still be admissible against the defendant. So you have actually now given permission to police officers to enforce the law that they don't know, to use the force that they should not use against the interest of the people that they should be serving, much less protecting. And now that gives us this whole scenario that we see in police departments across the country that I believe is going to make the work of this Justice Department, especially once Kristen Clark is confirmed to head up the Civil Rights Division, looking at these issues across the country is priority one in policing reform.
Mark Fancher, what do you make of this? Justifiable?
Well, this is yet another stunning display of the arrogance of authority, because it's just amazing to watch a prosecutor stand before the world and to make declarations that are blatantly illegal and unconstitutional. Back in 1985, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a case called Tennessee versus Garner, ruled that Tennessee's fleeing felon law, which basically provided that a law enforcement officer was justified in shooting to kill anybody who was a felon or somebody who was suspected of being a felon if they tried to escape. They struck that down and said that violated the Fourth Amendment, that it was unconstitutional, it was impermissible to shoot anyone who's trying to flee, unless the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses some type of significant threat of death or serious injury to somebody. So bottom line, unless you're dealing with somebody who's crazy, somebody who's psychopathic, and if you let them go, they're going to, injure or kill somebody, you've got to let somebody who's fleeing leave. And as the sergeant said earlier, all that they had to do was to let this brother go. They know they could find him easily enough. It's unlikely that he's got a private jet, that he's going to jump in and leave the country. People, Pookie knows where he lives. He knows where he's hiding out. I mean, somebody knows where he is. They can get him later. There's no need to engage in this confrontation. But what we also saw in the prosecutor's statement is what's fundamentally wrong with law enforcement culture in this country right now. And that is a belief that they are the boss of everything and everybody has to submit to their authority no matter what. Because the question was posed to the district attorney. He said, well, why couldn't they just let him go? And he said, no, they can't do that because they were given an assignment to go and to serve a warrant, and they had to complete their mission, which means that what they're going there to do overrides everything. No matter what the consequences, they are the authority. They are the ones that are in charge, and everybody else has to submit to their will, no matter what it may be. And that's just, something that you find throughout law enforcement, and it accounts in many ways for why the encounters between police officers and communities of color are often so hostile, because many officers go into these communities with a presumption that people are criminal, and if they're not criminal, they're going to be non-compliant and resist. And so they go in with an attitude. They go in hostile. They go in antagonistic, and it only escalates the tension as between them and the people they confront, as opposed to de-escalating it and leading to encounters that end with people walking away alive as opposed to somebody ending up dead.
Dwight McKee, I've got 2 minutes before we go.
Well, the first thing, if you look at them on the back of that pickup truck, it looked like they were on safari. It looked as if they were going hunting in the jungle somewhere. The mentality, which is why I believe that they don't want us to see the tapes, because they don't want to see the conversations that was happening on the back of that pickup truck. All they really needed, they were lacking, was a Confederate flag on the top of that truck when you looked at the attitudes and the tone that they had when they left. But I also don't understand why the local police didn't arrest them. It was all black town. They have 70 policemen, mostly black, in the town. They have a black mayor, a black supervisor. They should have taken initiative when there's a murder in their town, that they should have arrested these guys for an assassination and then work it out in the justice system down the line. That way they would have had possession of the tapes. And that way they would have possession. They would have been able to set the tone
1 minute
and the narrative for the case. We have to stop deferring to these wicked people if we have some authority in some jurisdiction. And so at some levels, I blame the mayor of the town and the city manager for deferring to the state police who came in at a level of it would look to be an assassination.
30.
They should have treated it as such, and they should have arrested the state's troopers that did the shooting.
We'll be back with more in a minute. Sure,
15.
this killing have been called justifiable. I mean, think about that.
10.
He was driving the car away, and they're calling the car a weapon. He was driving the car away, and the bullet is... What do you think about this, everybody? What do you think about choosing between being electrocuted and the firing squad in South Carolina? Wow. More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Whew. You guys, this is just a whole lot. I think I'm going to need a compress after the show is over. This is a lot. Someone in a car?
Mark, couldn't they?
Okay. Dwight?
Mark, couldn't they have arrested the guys from the local level?
Oh yeah.
They.
I mean, well, I don't know what kind of warrant it was, but I don't know why not. I mean, they could have. They could have.
They have arrested the sheriff officers that did the actual shooting. The local.
You know, it was jacked up from the beginning, from top to bottom. From top to bottom, this was a combination of the Ahmaud Arbery. You know, when the guys went and got their rifles and came back and wanted to do a citizen's arrest, got in the pickup trucks like back in the day with the KKK. That's what this was. That's what it looked like. And they just don't want anyone to see all that footage because there's so much probably incriminating stuff. And my view is there may have been even doctoring or corruption of some of that footage at this point.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Hold on. Wait a minute. Because now the first thing I thought about when they would not, the facial recognition technology that they're using, it works better. It's more efficient with white people than it is with black people because, we all look alike, right? You're seeing that. Okay, that's what the hiccups come when they have to look at people of color because we all look alike. Okay.
Right.
I'm worried about this footage now, CK.
And we have reason to be worried about. We have reason to be worried about it because this stinks. Okay. It stinks from beginning to end. It's very disappointing. It's very disappointing, especially for the family. And I'm saying disappointing because there are other words that I could use, but they would constitute profanity or something. And it's just that it's just so wrong on so many levels. From the judge, and I appear before judges. Judges have unfettered discretion to do a lot of things. But this judge, even in saying that he felt that only 20 minutes was relevant, imagine hearing that when your loved one's been shot in the back of the head. That what happened to him in the 1 hour and 40 minutes is not relevant. Not relevant to whom? What's not relevant? Everything is relevant about what happened to your child, your father, in the last moments of his death, leading up to his death. When he was, it's just ridiculous. But I'll tell you one thing, it's coming out. It's coming out. It's justice delayed right now, but it's coming out. If there's been tampering, there's a way with experts of determining if something has been tampered with. So
1 minute.
Get their stuff together right quick and in a hurry, because it's coming.
Okay. Stand by. We'll be up in within seconds. But I just want to know why you all think is Ron there to talk?
No, he's not.
Okay, thank you. I just sent you a text asking. So I wanted to make sure it's structure the questions. But this is a lot, everybody, and I think we need to be mindful because it does not. It seems that even after all of the marching that was done last year, it seems like things are crazier this year. I think hold on. We're coming up. Hold on. Just stay right there. We're coming up. Okay. Come on. I want to hear you.
15.
You are hot. And everybody else.
Yeah. Well, we got some of our NBA members out there, so they need to be careful now. This is not play. This is not play.
No, it's not.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. The prosecutor yesterday, Andrew Womble, announced the results of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation inquiry into the fatal shooting of Andrew Brown Jr., and they said it was justifiable. And they carried the press conference all the way through because people couldn't believe that this was the conclusion that they reached, given the fact that Andrew Brown was driving away from the police officers. He was driving away, and they called the car that he was driving away from. He was trying to get away from them. They said, now your car is a weapon. It could have hurt somebody. And Sergeant Sean Kennedy, retired from Chicago Police Department, you made the point that by shooting him, you made this car an unguided missile, Sergeant Kennedy, before I come back to you, Attorney Hoffler. I mean, that just sounds crazy. And they were in a neighborhood where these houses are close together, Sergeant Kennedy. It just seems so unsafe. It seems foolish what they did. Beyond that.
What's so interesting is a lot of times when I see these types of egregious misconduct by officers and poor judgment and stupidity, a lot of times I have to really look at the leaders of those agencies, because it's the leaders who set the tone for their entire agency to let them know what will not be tolerated. You know, and what I'm tired of is things keep happening and then agencies want to then react to what they already know. And it's just, you know, Black people are losing their lives unjustly and unnecessarily. And it's really sickening just the frequency that this keeps occurring. You know, like I said, as I watched that segment of the tape that popped up on the news yesterday, I'm just watching these officers using their own bodies around a car as if they can stop them because they have these long guns. And I'm thinking, okay, you arresting someone for drug-related charges. So I'm not sure if this is for intimidation or whatever, but it's almost like unless this guy was just going to come out his car with his hands up, that it was going to turn out bad. And just based on what's been happening in a lot of other situations, he could have still came out with his hands up and still got shot by the police. But, you know, they're trying to justify, you know, him being shot in the back as the car is leaving because of one of the officers.
Sergeant Kennedy, wait a minute. In the back of his head.
Yes. So they're trying to now spin it that the one officer who was in the front of the car did not move out fast enough. See, I mean, part of what you have to do is, you know, your body, you only have one body. So you don't want to use that one body in any type of dangerous situation where you may be crippled or you know, just disabled. And I'm watching how they're standing around this vehicle with their guns out as if they know this person is going to comply with their orders. And he didn't. You know, from what I watched, he was not trying to intentionally run into any officer. He was just trying to get the heck out of Dodge. That's what he was doing. But they're spinning it to say that he used that as a dangerous weapon, which is just ridiculous. But I think that all of this is on the part of North Carolina is just their plan. They're being very strategic to the point when they only gave a snippet of the video to the family. All of this is very strategic on their part. And like I said, it's going to come out sooner or later. And when it comes out, all hell is going to break from this because it's going to come out somewhere or another. You know, they're not trying to be transparent. They're trying to justify, like I said, a state-sanctioned lynching. And the fact that these officers are not being held accountable, that's the problem that citizens are having, Black citizens in particular, are having with police departments, with police officers. It's like, you know, you're not serving and protecting, you are policing and over-policing in the Black community. That should have never happened. I mean, the fact that he was wanted on a drug-related charges, he is it's not like he's going someplace where he might be a threat to someone else, he's going to kill someone else or kill anyone. That wasn't the situation. It's like you took a simple drug warrant and turned it into a homicide. That's the problem we're having.
Sergeant Kennedy, where people are selling drugs out west for profit and they're becoming business moguls. I mean, really? I'm sure the drug charges that he had against him, if he were white and living out west, he'd be a business mogul and he'd be making a lot of money. I don't even want to hear it. Now, mind you, his attorneys, the attorneys for Andrew Brown's family, asked that the district attorney recuse himself from the investigation because of his ties to the police. Now, first you, CK, and then you, Mark Fancher, and then you, Reverend Attorney, Reverend Doctor Attorney, Todd Huey. CK, your take on that?
This is a dangerous, deplorable, and disgusting situation. Dangerous, deplorable, and disgusting. It is dangerous because Elizabeth City is a small town, a small Black town, and it is on the verge of exploding. It's deplorable because the way that this has been handled has been reeks of corruption from top to bottom from the inception. From the inception. And the inception, to me, is how the law enforcement approached this whole scenario. And then just disgusting, because that is what I feel as a lawyer. And by the way that this has been handled, they have counsel advising them. Make no mistake about it. They are trying to condition the jury pool. They have done an opening statement. Notice that the district attorney started off with saying that he was a well-known drug dealer. That's how he started off his presentation. That's how he started off discussing that. He didn't actually say he. He criminalized and dehumanized Anthony Brown from the beginning when he was supposed to come and talk about their findings. And so this whole thing reeks. I want the Justice Department to really investigate this, the FBI to really investigate this from top to bottom.
Wait,
and
CK.
I bet there are racial...
CK, wait a minute. The investigation came from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. That's the state FBI.
No, I'm not talking about, no, yeah, but I'm not good. The Justice Department needs to get in there.
Okay.
And I think that the federal, and I know the FBI and the North Carolina, all in this together group, Bureau of Investigation, that's not who I'm talking about. Okay. People from Washington, D.C. need to descend in the federal office in D.C. and the FBI and check this, and the Justice Department's got to get into it. Because that's the only way we're going to see justice. And we need to see that video. It's coming, and they need to brace themselves, because I bet there are a lot of N-words and all this kind of stuff on that video, racial animus. And by the way, we can talk about hate crimes. That's what I predict. And the reason why we're saying this is because they refuse to allow the evidence to be shown. And you only do that when you're afraid of something. They're hiding behind something or many things on that 2-hour video. And if they're not hiding behind it, just let us see it. What's the problem? Let us see it. Let the family see it and the people see it.
Mark Fancher,
despicable.
I see it's despicable. I mean, Mark Fancher, I just see so many issues here. And, you operate as a black lawyer, but you're also a black lawyer who's in the civil liberty space. What do you see? I mean, the family tried to get this prosecutor off the case because they said he's got ties to the police. You have the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation who conducted this investigation. This comes from the state. This conclusion that this was justifiable.
Yeah, I understand. I'm in no way minimizing this, but I think we need to do a reality check and understand that this happens daily. It's not always as high profile. It's not always as well publicized. It's not always as large in terms of the number of people involved. But on a daily basis, what happens across the country is that black people in particular become guilty of an additional alleged crime, and that is that they become guilty of what the police officers refer to as contempt of cop, which basically means that, we are in authority, we are in charge, and if you don't do what we say when we're on the scene confronting you, then you pay the price. We will beat you. We will kill you. We will do all kinds of things. We will inflict punishment for you are not complying with what we're asking you to do. Now, there's more going on here, in terms of the firepower and the personnel that they brought to effect an arrest. But as we've been saying, there's probably likely to be a lot that comes out about what they were actually really trying to do and what their motives were. But when they descended on this brother and they showed their authority, when they showed their guns, which in my mind probably are a substitute for some other deficiency that many of them have, and this brother did not comply. He said that I'm going to leave. Then he was guilty of contempt of cop, and he was deserving of death. And it happens every day where officers, when they pull people from their cars, when they're trying to place them under arrest, and if they perceive the slightest bit of resistance, then the taser comes out, the batons come out, and they immediately, summarily, and on the spot punish, this person. for being guilty of contempt of cop.
Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary?
Only if they're black.
Yes.
Only if they're black. I just have to add, Mark, only if they're black.
Oh, yes. Thank you for that friendly amendment. That is absolutely correct. Or brown.
Yeah, and to that point, all you got to do is mention Rayshard Brooks, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, before he died, fatally injured in the back of a police van. The only thing he had done that Sunday morning is he made eye contact with a police officer and took off running. They didn't find anything on him. He had nothing that had indicated that he had committed any sort of crime except he ran. And so we've seen this too many times. I went back and looked at some of the narrative in these warrants, right? Small amounts of drugs, no indication on the warrants that there would be a search for any weapons, which often go together with the dealing of drugs. So what was in the mind of these officers other than to show up in the kind of flex to kind of prove this point? And I think we see that in the culture of departments, which may be to Brother Dwight's point, the issue of which department is the one that's designated to execute this warrant. So there are a whole lot of issues there. But what is clear here is that there's racial animus that's being covered up. This DA carefully scripted, found exactly what he wanted. The officer touched the car, and then Mr. Brown took off in the car. Some of that is just too choreographed and convenient to actually be plausible. And so the notion that the DA, what did he say? He said, I apply the facts to the law. Well, no, that's not what you do when you do an investigation, right? If there are issues of fact, if there are fact issues, that doesn't get determined by the DA. That gets determined by a judge in a bench trial or a jury in terms of a jury trial. He's got to make the determination, were these officers' actions reasonable? Everybody else sees that it was unreasonable. Here's the other thing. Houses close together, you're going to shoot at a car that's moving away from you, right? That car, the line of sight, or the anticipation of being able to kind of track velocity to make sure that you can do target acquisition. It was reckless to shoot at a fleeing car. It put other lives in danger. Other officers were a part of it, and there's been no discussion. How many folks were in the homes? How many folks could have been in the homes? All of that should be calculated because that has to be part of the assessment about the reasonableness or the excess of the officer's use of force. And so there, even in the policy of the sheriff's department, it does not suggest, it even says that the officer should not get in the way of a moving vehicle, much less shoot at one. So there are all kinds of issues. There's going to be civil litigation, and if there's no criminal prosecution here, the civil litigation and the discovery that comes from it is going to be so egregious and embarrassing to this DA, it's not even going to be funny, much less I'm hoping that the Justice Department will make a call and say, hold on to everything that you got because we're coming down.
Anita from North Carolina. You are in North Carolina. Anita, what's on your mind today?
Good morning.
Good morning, Anita.
Good morning. When the man was killed by the civilian, I don't know if that was Rashad, just like Trayvon, people are taking control of, what's it called? I forget what they call it, like the Wild Wild West, where everybody go out for themselves. And the police are doing the same thing. And the whole standards are going to have to be revised. America needs a lot of things revising. You know, they're saying poor women live at standards that they had probably in 1900. They're trying to make people live off of that today. And so everything just has to be revised. You cannot have executions like that on the street. People deserve a jury trial. They're getting rid of good people that are being elected into office by majority vote. They're getting rid of them and scandalizing them. And all kinds of things are going on. And we need to find out what are causing the children to have this many problems with the police, where they have to keep being hunted down like this. And we need to correct the family conditions of these people and the white community too, because they can't keep getting away with and turning their head that their children are, doing the same thing and covering it up with drugs. I mean, things are happening in all the neighborhoods, and they're covering it up, but they are just bloodshedding our children. And we can't die for the whole world. You know, we just can't. And I want the right things. And unfortunately, like I said, my congressman, they kicked him out of office. I really need him to be back somewhere working in the community to make sure these children have good jobs. You know, I want to get the Arab community to help us build hospitals and things. We got to go where the money is to make sure these children's lives are corrected, and older people, whoever the police is trying to hunt down, that they have the right things in their community. If the white community does not want to submit to their bad past, then we have to look for the world community to support us some kind of way. And we have to remove these people that are here out of office and make sure they stay out of office and stop removing the good people that are changing things and making it where people can live like human beings out of office through slander or whatever they want to put them out of office for.
Dwight McKee, thank you so much, Anita. Thank you for all. You're always so thoughtful. Dwight, after all of the marching last year, now mind you, marching is not organizing necessarily, because, you know, I think many people don't really understand the work that was done that civil rights organizations actually do. Marches are a culmination of a lot of organizing, a lot of educating, a lot of negotiating, a lot of stuff. Because a march is a demonstration. That is just that. After all of this activity last year, it's like the knee is still on our necks, Dwight.
Santita, they shoot us if we clean. They shoot us if we jogging. They shoot us. They kill us if we're kneeling. I mean, there is no real posture that we can assume that satisfies people who are intent, it seems like, on figuring out a reason and a justification for shooting you before they arrive at the scene. And so, you know, again, my fear is that with people without redress at some point become violent themselves. And I think that the police, if they're not careful, it's going to come to a point where they become the prey rather than the predator. And so you have to be careful what you ask for, because I think that people who have marched and demonstrated, and now they're figuring out that there is no justice in that, are going to figure out a way to avenge themselves and to protect themselves. And it can get real nasty out here.
Sergeant Kennedy, we're told to comply. It seems, though, that when we comply, we die. What are you supposed to do? I mean, it's just like you tell folks I can't breathe. No one takes the knee off your neck. I mean, this guy's trying to drive away. They kill him. They shoot him in the back of the head. I mean, wow. Got any tips?
You know something? I think about my organization, NABLIO. So there's a workshop that we conduct in different cities when we have a police conference. It's called What to Do When Stopped by the Police. And it's basically just to make sure young people and citizens, understand certain things that they can do to lessen, a violent interaction with the police. And, and it's some valuable information. But, and I'm looking just at what has occurred in 2020, 2021. And I was having a conversation with someone just about those different techniques. And it's almost like, regardless to what we can teach people, how to conduct themselves in police encounters, we are still having people who are doing the right thing, and sometimes they still wind up dead by the police, as far as whether it's by air freshener whistling from the rear view mirror, from someone pulling out a taser or whatever, gun instead of a taser. But it's almost like for Black people, we are damned if we do and damned if we don't. It's just ridiculous. It's almost as if the police agencies, certain people in police agencies, are using their authority to do what the heck they want to with black people, which includes fatally shooting them. And what makes it even worse is when they are able to hide behind different either laws or doctrines like qualified immunity to keep them from being held accountable as far as civilly. But when you look at the criminal part, you have state attorneys like the guy who said that this in North Carolina that this was a justified shooting. You have some of those state attorneys who have that type of mindset because they do have a close working relationship with law enforcement agencies where it's almost like it's designed to protect the cops. You know, it's like, let me see if I can find one small thing that I can spin around on behalf of the cops, such as, well, this one officer, the car touched them. Well, it touched you because, you know, you were standing in front of a moving vehicle and you couldn't get out the way quick enough. But that was your stupidity that did that. But like I said, it's ridiculous what we're seeing, and the black community are tired. And I keep thinking about, I watched a 7-minute video on YouTube in 2020 from, you know, the different protests and riots that went on. And this black woman was going off. She was talking about, you know, she don't give a damn about, you know, breaking into these stores and, you know, looting and all this based on how black people have been oppressed. And she said one thing. She said, you better be lucky that black people are not trying to seek revenge. And that was a powerful, powerful, powerful statement.
And that's the fear. And this young lady, I saw her. She was actually active in Operation Push and in Rainbow Push, bless her heart. I mean, the thing is, that would be spiritually corrupting for us. That's the beauty of Dr. King's teachings, of Gandhi's teachings, of the teachings of Jesus, of Fannie Lou Hamer, of our ancestors. We've not been seeking revenge. We've been seeking redress. We have been seeking to make things right. We've been seeking to get everybody whole. My father often says, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth leaves everybody blind and toothless. You can't eat and you can't see. What are you going to do? So, everybody, we've got to go up in our politics. This is not working. It's not working after all of the organizing, after all of the bills that have yet to be passed, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that needs to be passed. But there is a cultural issue that we have here. That's very clear. Andrew Brown Jr. was shot in the back of his head as he was driving away from police. He was shot in the back of his head. And the police and the DA, the prosecutor said it was justified. They were right to shoot him in the back of his head. And Dwight, you made the point. As they were riding, as the police were riding to this place, they looked like they were going to a safari. They looked like they were going to a party. It was like a gotcha. What are we doing, everybody? Remember, red, yellow, black, brown, and white, we're all precious in God's sight. This is not right, and it's unsustainable. Reverend Donald Parsons puts it this way: even clouds run out of rain. Believe me, you can't do people wrong forever. Right is going to win. In fact, it already has. The question is,
30.
When we line up before our Maker, or at the end of our days, what side will you be on? That's the question I have for you today, and that's the question that we should be asking ourselves, not just individually, but collectively.
15.
Rest in power, Andrew Brown. God bless us all. Love you, everybody. Until tomorrow, God willing, I hope to be with you. I'm Santita Jackson. You can catch this podcast of this on WCPT 820/Santita. I love you, everybody. Have a great day. Everybody, I'm on Facebook Live. Do you want to have any closing thoughts?
For me, Sean Kennedy, my closing thought is to the citizens, to the residents of these different communities. Keep the pressure going. Do not let up, because we will never be just handed something. We have to hold our government officials and our police departments accountable. So just simply keep the pressure on.
How do we keep the pressure on, Sean?
One way is to lawfully protest, to march, and also to make sure that they use their powers, their voices when it comes time to vote. Vote in volume. You know, knock on your neighbor's door. You know, people who can't get out, absentee ballot. But use that vote. I mean, use your vote to get people out of office who pass, you know, different laws or who are not doing something on behalf of your best interest. They have the power.
Anyone else have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that while we do need to keep up the pressure, we do need to do all of the things that we can do, that we also need to remain very focused on reality and not engaging in self-delusion and understand what we're really up against. You know, when you march, usually it's for the purpose of trying to appeal to the reason and the better judgment, the better angels of the broader public so that they can be persuaded about the rightness of your cause. When you vote, you always do that with the objective of trying to influence, how government is run and who runs it and all of those kinds of things. But what we're dealing with now is a culture that has lost all sense of reason. It has become totally irrational because, unfortunately, a critical mass of white workers are in a state of panic. They feel that their position within the society is slipping away, that they're losing everything that they've had, and that they're being overwhelmed and overcome by this colored horde of people who are swarming in over the border, people who are multiplying at greater rates than they are within the cities and everywhere else, and they're in a state of panic, fueled by stereotypes and demagoguery and all kinds of things that are causing them to react and to act in ways that are totally irrational and ways that are violent. And many of these people are in law enforcement, which accounts for their actions and the things that they're doing, which we find so deplorable. So we're not dealing with people who are going to listen to reason. And we need to be real clear about that. And that should in many ways influence the ways in which we do keep up the pressure and the ways in which we do influence, the ways in which we do organize in an attempt to change things.
Reverend Urey, do you have something to say?
Well, I think the points are certainly well taken. The DA said something, and I think it's very poignant. He says, I was duly elected by the people to make this decision. That's why he did not refer it out. Don't miss that reference, that those who are elected claim an obligation to those who elected them, not those who you voted for. So let's be real clear about this process, and I think part of it is to be who's going to run against him the next time. Do recognize that there's probably some career ascension he's looking for to move from the DA's office to probably some judicial appointment at the state level or even higher. We've got to pay attention to more than just the sensationalism about the big elections that get our attention. The ones that are much more sinister, much more dangerous, and much more impactful to our day-to-day are the elections that are closest to us that never get a whole lot of attention. And we're seeing it in the case of Andrew Brown. We've seen it over and over and over again across the country. And I think now what everybody can do is reach out to your senator, your United States senators, two in each state, and tell them they must move on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. They've got to do it, and they got to do it now. Because if we don't get federal oversight, intervention, and jurisdiction by way of the dollars that support, the federal dollars that support these police departments across the country to get leverage, to get the kind of change we're talking about, we're going to continue to be dealing with the same issues state by state, and these states are beyond backwards. They are almost antique in terms of how they approach policing. The running away, the fleeing of a suspect, and using deadly force that we see time and time again ought to bring back the image of slave patrols. That's exactly how they operated. If you dare to flee the plantation without the authority of the overseer can take your life. Don't get it twisted. This isn't back in the day. This is today. And if we don't get engaged, we're going to have to deal with it tomorrow.
Or tonight. Or later today.
Right, or this morning, or before lunchtime, and
Oh my God!
Close the curtains. I'm not going outside. I'm going back to bed. This is just too much.
Brianna let you know you're not safe there. How about that? Both of them. Wait a minute. You can be minding your business at home. Dwight.
Last week in
yes.
Houston. Last week in Houston, they sent police out. Last week in Houston, they sent police out to arrest a lion. A wild beast. If you compare with how they arrested the lion, who they did arrest, by the way, non-violently, and how they went out and hunted Brother Brown with all of these guns blazing, jumping out of the back of that wagon as if they were hunting slaves, and contrast the two approaches, it gives you some sense of how much they value the lion as opposed to how much they devalue us.
Because they weren't going to kill him.
Something in this culture.
He's in danger.
No, and had they killed him, Peter would have been in an uproar. Is something in the culture that inherently devalues us in relationship to everything else in the culture. And if that's not
right, say that one more time. It inherently devalues. The tiger had a value that was worth protecting. That's why they took the tiger alive.
As opposed to Brother Brown, who had no value.
Exactly.
They jumped out of the van with the guns blazing. It is something in this culture that just devalues us, that if it's not dealt with, I'm not sure this country can survive. And you can elaborate on the theory if you want to.
Well, I've got about 7 minutes before we have to get out the studio. But, I mean, let me
give my other time.
Okay, well, let me get to CK because I want to get closing thoughts from everybody, and then I'll let Reverend Yuri close us out. CK?
Well, I go back to the 3 Ds: dangerous, deplorable, and disgusting. And I want us to juxtapose the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, and the way that he approached the George Floyd case and the way that this district attorney is approaching this case. And I want us to remember that, yes, people do not value our lives, but we have to be careful who we elect. We have to. Elizabeth City has an HBCU, Elizabeth City State, right there.
Absolutely.
Students and a formidable HBCU. Although all HBCUs to me are formidable, but an HBCU that's been there for a long time, groomed and trained many brilliant minds. This is simply something that is disgusting. It's disgusting the way it's been handled. The impact, the psychological impact on that family and on the community is something that we will have to live with and feel for a very long time, just as we are all feeling some level of PTSD behind the George Floyd murder. And to me, they're equal. The fact that they refuse to release the footage compounds, for me, the problem. And so we have to be careful who we elect. We have to insist on the passage of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and we have to encourage the Justice Department, this Justice Department, to descend upon these police departments and to do something so they can make findings, conclusions, and insist on change. And we also have to, on a local level, I talked about making sure who we be careful who we vote for. We know who we're voting for. This guy has demonstrated what he's prepared to do and not prepared to do, so don't reelect him. Don't elevate him to higher office. make sure that people understand that their votes count.
Reverend Dr. Yeary, have I missed anyone? Sergeant Kennedy, did you say everything you wanted to say? Because I got to get close with us. We have to be out of the studio in 4 minutes. Reverend Dr. Yeary.
Yes,
You did?
Yes, I did say everything that I needed to. But, one thing you might want to do is maybe have a show to actually talk about the Justice in Policing Act, because that is something that needs to be passed. But people need to be aware of certain parts of that act that actually does not do what, it's they think that it will do, such as qualified immunity in several other parts. So I would recommend having a show on that from someone, and I can actually assist you with that, with people who can actually talk about the parts that needs to be strengthened before it's passed.
Well, then you know what I will do? I will pledge to do that with you, okay?
Sure.
Okay, fantastic. Reverend Dr. Yeary, closing thought, 4 minutes.
I'm not going to take 4 minutes. Couple of things. The moving of the car. Dwight mentioned something. They get out of the truck. Guns drawn, ready to shoot. They see Andrew Brown in the car. He doesn't run to the car. They run to him. So they put themselves in that position. And so I think as we start looking at what really happened, Madam Chair has said it a few times, Attorney Hoffler, about not really being able to analyze these videos completely and all of the different angles from all of the footage, which is a lot of footage to have to review. There's a lot here. We have to continue to insist that the investigation is thorough and the investigation is proper. And we've already seen the DA is not going to do it, the state judge is not going to require it. The next level of intervention has to come from the Department of Justice. We've got to appeal to the Attorney General to go ahead and assume the federal jurisdiction to look into this, into the possibility of any violation of Andrew Brown's rights. We've got to do that. If we don't, imagine if we didn't have body cameras, if we didn't have media, if we didn't have technology, this would have been swept. You would have never heard of Andrew Brown or many of the others that we've talked about in recent years. Mr. Scott in South Carolina, had there not been a bystander videoing that encounter, that would have been swept. There would have been some narrative. Even when we look at Minneapolis and you go back and you look at what report was written the night that George Floyd was killed, there was no reference to anything that we saw on the video. There's a whole lot that has to be looked into there because warrant applications, police reports are often distorted to suit the necessary cover, especially when things go bad on the streets. So we got to work through it. And I would just say, Madam Chair laid out 3 Ds. I would add a 4th. She mentioned dangerous, despicable, and what was the other one, CK? Disgusting, deplorable, deplorable and disgusting. But the 4th one that is really standing out here is deadly. This was deadly, and not just deadly to Andrew Brown, deadly to the psyche of Black and brown people across the country. This can happen to you. And if we don't push back against it, the slave patrols are coming back. The problem is nobody knows where the plantation is.
Hey, everybody, it's something for us to think about today. And while it happens to Black and brown people most frequently, this happens to white people too. And eventually, if we don't work this out over here, it's going to consume us all. And maybe, I don't know, where's Sally Field when I need her? Maybe we all need some animal uniforms, animal costumes. Maybe that'll keep Black folks safer. Just kidding. That's tight. It's tight. It's awful that the ASPCA gets more shine than the NAACP. Got to think about that, everybody. Where are our values? What do we value? Who do we value? What do we value? Who are we? Think about that. God willing, I'll be with you tomorrow morning on the Santita Jackson Show. Love y'all. Love you. Sergeant Kennedy, Dwight McKee, Mark Fancher, Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, Esquire. Got a lot to think about. Thank you all for all the great, brilliant points that you all made today. Have a great day, everybody. Love you, love you, love you. And just keep on elevating, everybody. I love you. Love you, Keith. What's up, everybody? God bless. Thank you. Have a great one, everybody.